I look around and I realize, this, first of all, I want to say it's very interesting that I'm speaking tonight, because usually it's Yaakov Shalushulis. And then I feel like, wow, this is it. I finally got called up to the big leagues, had a bracha under the chuppah, and first speaker in the family at a Sheva Brachos. And I was like, oh, this is crazy. I really hope I don't let you down. I mean, it's inevitable, but I really hope I don't let you down. But I realize I'm old. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but looking around the room, statistically, I'm not in the younger half of the room, which is always just great crazy to me. And I'm just also looking around, and it just so happens I'm looking at the bottle of Coke, and how many people in this room actually know why it's called Coke Classic? Okay? Because, I mean, before Corona, like one of the greatest tragedies that ever struck American society, which by definition is the world, right, was when somebody had the gall to try to come out with a new Coke because they wanted to change the flavor. And you can't imagine, I think, political fortunes rose and fell because of this chaval. And this was like, you guys probably never knew that, right?
Okay, stop us.
So there you go. There's my random fact for everybody else.
Tell us about the time.
You're showing your age.
Right. So, first of all, of course, I have to say thank you for Chaya for making this, for being my hostess with the Moses, and to taking care of me. In a similar vein, thank you for Kalman for taking care of me. Basically, our modus operandi is just follow him. And thank you again, of course, and of course, Mazel Tov to everybody in the Simcha, beautiful Simcha. We'll get into that in a bit, but I just have to, of course, give my akaras tov to the people who are literally feeding me and housing me. In Eretz Yisrael, in Israel, this problem I've been having is I just can't get my phone battery to stay charged at all. Okay? Now, at home, it's been a very challenging year, and with zero respite whatsoever, and my emotional battery was also nearing empty, and it was just not holding a charge whatsoever. I feel, where's Perry? I feel like I've been able to refill that tank and that battery this week. And my spiritual and emotional battery has been rejuvenated by this beautiful wedding, this beautiful family, the Bali Simcha, the couple, the love, and of course, Eretz Yisrael Kedosha. This is great. It's like one paragraph in.
Give him something harder.
So, I just want to say, I have 3 happy places in my head, okay? I'm not talking about physical happy places, but my kids know that I fidget all the time. My family, I guess, knows that too. My kids kind of pick on me about that. I'm always like, fidgeting and, just moving around in my seat. My brothers and sisters know that too, but they may not realize that when I'm becalmed, I'm in my place, and in my happy place, my kids know I'm not fidgeting, okay? And I'm kind of curious, by the way, there's 3 places. I'm kind of curious if anybody here knows any of those 3. I think 1 for sure you should know, 2 maybe. Usually this is the time Bina hops in and starts having conversation with me.
I control myself because Boss is on the phone and you have your daughter on the phone,
So you're worried about me or you?
No,
because by now, usually I've had a full conversation with Bina during the course of my speech, so I'm surprised I haven't heard anything from Bina yet. So 2, you may know, and sleeping is not one of them. It doesn't count. But anyways, the point is, the first one, of course, as most people know, is very happy when there are birds around.
Triple out.
Parakeets.
Birds, yeah.
Specifically.
I'm fascinated by them, and they just stare at them for a while. Right. Whatever it may be. The other one is, of course, when I'm in or near water. Which goes for most people, I think. But it really, yeah. And the third is actually something I only realized yesterday.
Planes.
What did you say?
Corona test.
Okay, the guessing game is over. Okay, the third element, that was when I'm in Eretz Yisrael, and of course everything about it is special. I'm not trying to take away from one, chasser from one to take away to give to the other. But when I get to visit with my nieces and nephews and their families in their homes and listening to them and playing with the kids and watching their families, and it's hard for me to describe. People think it's corny, but for some reason, that to me is better than any scenery. And it's ironic because I find it odd that when I leave, they thank me for visiting. Okay? As if I'm the one I'm not the one being treated like royalty, and I'm not the one who receives such love and such a feeling of tranquility. It's like being thanked for having treated me. And also, and yes, the households may be chaotic, and there's small children, and usually compounded by the fact that I'm usually here for a simcha, so they're typically recovering from a simcha. So the next day, everybody knows a house with a bunch of kids, and everybody was up late the night before. It might be a little chaotic. And just a side note, I understand that I understand you have to apologize as a rite of passage. You have for a home not being, a perfect condition, for like a realtor to come and have an open house when I show up the night after a class. I understand that you're genetically obligated to apologize for that, okay? But just so you know that, and also you should also know it's not any different in my house or anybody's house, okay? But honestly, if your house were to be perfect, the day after a chasna and a bunch of little kids, that would really make me worry, okay? That would scare me, like, horror movies scare me. The peace and the menuchas nefesh continued, yesterday and last night into my beautiful experience going straight from Abigail and Moshe to the Kosel for very meaningful chakras and breakfast with my Greek brother Kalman. And it was really just it was one of those, I like to point to a certain period of time where I can say that, these defined my trip, aside from the major reason that came. And then, so, next. This week I'm sorry, this is already running long, but this is chukas, and as we all know, Torah Aduma is the paradigm for a chok. It is the poster child for a chok. And Rashi mentions in Chazal that the Torah Aduma is a kapara for the Chet Egel, which is why it's a para. And of course, it's a mystery why people were trying to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu according to what they thought was a good way. The Beis Halevi says he's certain that, given that the involvement of Aaron, that there must have been some profound mystical idea associated with the Egel, and there were certain reasons that the Egel would have been the device that was chosen, and it was all ultimately, obviously, it was a chait, but it wasn't straightforward like Avodah Zarah as much as it was they were trying to channel their effort. But the major issue was that HaKadosh Baruch Hu never commanded them that this should be done, and that's a fundamental precept of the Torah is that it's all chait. And that's an extreme example, but that was the major point. Basically, that was the major problem. According to some, that the Mishnah is a kapara for the Chet Egel. That's why when the Mishnah over and over it says Kasher Tziva Hashem Es Moshe, because that's really, you have to understand. And the Mishnah is something you could theoretically justify in your head, but still, Pasuk is drilling it into you. So even though it might be understandable why you're doing something, okay, I'm losing everybody. But the reason must be ultimately because it's a tzivut, and there's no understanding of the paradum. There's no understanding whatsoever of how this works, and ultimately, and you can't possibly try to rationalize or justify it. And later in the parasha, we learn that because of the name Mariva, that Moshe couldn't enter Eretz Yisrael, and Rashi says, that because that HaKadosh Baruch Hu said because you weren't sanctifying me by doing what I told you and speaking to the rock, that's why you're not Zeicha. But what's interesting is what's implied is what Rashi doesn't say. It doesn't say you did something wrong, but what ultimately is that Moshe and Aaron didn't do something actively wrong, but they missed an opportunity to do something right, and could have said the message to Klal Yisrael. And so the Vilna Gaon says on this that the person will have a din b'cheshbon, and why? What's the repetition when it goes to Shema? It's din b'cheshbon. And it says, din is what you did, and cheshbon is what you could have done compared to what you accomplished, which is obviously very scary, because you don't know what you're supposed to be. But and also it does remind me of the Good Samaritan episode of Seinfeld. Which is why I throw it in there. Don't go there. Okay. But, right. So the Gur Aryeh has a shot that that when Hashem says, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu says that Yam Lo Yamanti Bi, that you didn't believe in me, that somebody with emunah, perfect emunah, that was the problem. Somebody with emunah should be that they were frustrated. They were frustrated with Klal Yisrael, and then they thought they spoke to him or whatever, and they were frustrated. But somebody who has perfect emunah in Hashem, and perfect tachon, shouldn't have anger. You shouldn't have gotten angry because somebody who has a perfect emunah and perfect does. So the curious shot is that indicated a lack of emunah. Obviously, we're talking about it's a relative thing. That we're talking about Moshe Rabbeinu. It was disappointing to Kadosh Baruch Hu because it was Moshe Rabbeinu that showed some kind of deficiency. That's what I'd like to focus on. That the interpretation of the Chet of the Mei Meriva is because I think it's easier for me to connect to and to the Parshas Parah Duma at the very beginning, because both the Chet of the Mei Meriva and the Parah Duma have that common nekuda that they require that complete submission. Their underlying concept is that what went wrong was that ultimately it's Kol Min Shemaim, and you have that you have to and you have to be completely mavata yourself, and you have to completely just give over to the fact that Kadosh Baruch Hu is in charge. And the Parah Duma is inexplicable. You can't explain it by any mortal comprehension that we have. And the Mei Meriva highlights the centrality of treating your actions and your direction for Hashem almost like it's an executive decision, as they say in the business world. That in both, that you just have to do it. You're part of the team. The general says you do it. Your quarterback says go, you go. You don't get to second guess what the shot is. And in both parties, our opinion, our motivation is completely sublimated. And whether or not it's something that you could theoretically justify or not, it doesn't matter, because ultimately the reason is it's a fake, and that's it. So being about the understanding that Kol Min Shemayim is something fundamental in our lives, and it's what's allowed us to concentrate on doing what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants of us without any distractions and getting sidetracked. And as a general rule, of course, being able to see that bigger picture is a very helpful recipe for navigating your life in a lot of Agmas Nefesh. So if this sounds like I'm giving you advice for a newly married couple, I guess it is. But only because I'm repeating something you know, right? So there's no oh my gosh, she's telling me that I should, wake up in the morning and wash my face. Of course, you know this. But to cover all the bases and give you real advice. Where is Shmuley, by the way? Are you around? I missed his Shmit. I missed his I figured I was speaking to him too.
You spoke at Zoom, remember you?
So I'm going to say to you, Yehuda, okay, the same thing I said to Shmuley, right? I asked him, I said, how's it going? I asked him how's it going, because it's the first time I've seen him since before I got married. And I asked him what he does when he gets into an argument. Okay? And Shmuley starts snarking. Okay? So immediately I cut him off. And I said, first thing you do is apologize. Okay? I said, that's the default. And after that, you kind of try to figure out what you did wrong, right? It doesn't even matter. Like the first thing you do is if you started, I said, I'm constantly guilty. I don't know what I did. I just apologize. That's the first thing you have to do. You got to be mad to yourself. The first thing you do is apologize. So one of the first times I visited Chaniel and Ari in their home a few years ago, I was struck by how completely in sync they were. As they were talking to me, they handed off sentences in the middle and continued for each other, and it was like watching the same person. And just absorbing this dynamic gave me a tremendous menuchas in it. Okay? And then yesterday also, when I was at Moshe and Abigail, and I observed that incredible tenderness they have for each other, which stems from such a complete and total... Oh, okay. Come on, I'm almost done. I'm telling you, I'm almost done. Right? But I was the incredible tenderness, and they have that Moshe and Abigail have for each other, and that stems from such a complete and total trust. I also had a tremendous maneuver in that. So my bracha to you.
You should come visit us too, Yaakov.
I haven't come to you yet. I will.
Trust me, you'll be very happy.
Right. And not only that, it's going to be easier, because you'll all be next to Imar. My brother, someday soon, I'll be back in Eretz Yisrael for another simcha, or not, I'll just be back. And your home will provide me. You should give me the same menuchas and nefesh, the same joy that your brothers and your sisters and your cousins before you.
I love it. Good for 11.
Right. May we continue to see nachas from you both, from Malki and from everyone here. Continue to see simchas and nachas. And thank you very much for making me part of this beautiful simcha.
I just want to say 2 words. Well, everybody is in speech.
Everyone's eating.